Good morning. Our next speaker is no stranger to us. Dave Ryan, Executive Director of the Salisbury Wicomico Economic Development Corporation, is going to give us an update on the economic environment in our region. But first, let me tell you a little about Dave and his background. Dave was named Executive Director of the Salisbury Wicomico Economic Development Corporation on October 3rd, 1993. Based in Salisbury, Maryland, the Salisbury Wicomico Economic Development Corporation was founded in 1968 as a public-private partnership charged with strengthening the local and regional economy through the attraction, retention, and diversification through the community's economic and employment base. Dave began his career as a sales representative for the pharmaceutical firm of Warner Lambert. After district, key account, and divisional assignments, he assumed the regional manager Northeast position in Rochester, New York. Born and raised in Salisbury, Dave received his undergraduate degree in marketing and economics from Old Dominion University and his master's of business administration degree from Salisbury University. Dave serves on numerous boards and commissions and is a past president of the Maryland Economic Development Association. Dave lives in Salisbury with his wife and 3 children. Let's give a warm welcome to Dave Ryan.
Thanks, George. I appreciate being here. Appreciate more of the lights and the bulbs. It's always great to hear Gary talk. I've had the pleasure and the opportunity to hear Gary a number of times, and even though economics is not a real exact science, Gary seems to hit the mark just about every time. We appreciate spending time here. Also glad to see Joe, and I don't know if Sam's going to make it today, but you're in a treat for after this presentation as Joe Mason from Davenport gives an update from the county's bond council. And I know Bob's here. I don't know if Bob's still here, but I really appreciate Mr. Culver tagging along with you and our breakfast in New York and going into the presentations with the guidance of Joe and Sam from Davenport. These guys are real pros, and you can tell when you walk into these rooms, it's in a little bit tense, if you will, because we want to do a really good job, but they put us at ease, and they're well respected by the analysts, which bodes well for all of us. So I'm happy to participate, Joe, and thanks for coming out today. The presentation today will be in roughly 3 parts. We'll speed up the process, Ernie, to try to get us back on time, but it'll be in 3 parts. In the first part, it'll be more positive as we go throughout the presentation. Fair warning, but it'll be in 3 parts, and we'll talk about the business climate that we've been operating in the past 5, 6, 7 years, given the recession. We'll talk about what we can do. There's 4 things we can do from an economic development standpoint. I'm not just talking about good old Dave here, but I'm talking about collectively. Mary and Danny's here with Somerset and Worcester. But collectively, what can we do to help grow our job base, as Gary pointed out? And then third, we'll talk about where we are from an unemployment standpoint, job standpoint, and what may spill over into 2016. But when we look at the state business climate, we hear lots about that. We've heard lots about the recession, and I know Mike Gill pretty well, and we've had a lot of time to spend together in the past year. And we don't always rank very high on various surveys when it comes to the cost structure or the regulatory environment in the state of Maryland. We do terrific in terms of workforce and technology and education. So as we improve that business climate collectively, the hope is we get more people looking at Maryland. And if we can do that, we will get our fair share in Salisbury and Wicomico. These are, and I'll yield to Danny and Mary too, but like every industry, everyone has their trade groups or trade publications, site selection, area development, probably the 2 most prominent in our world of economic development. And it would be nice to say, if we did this one thing, then this would happen. But it really doesn't work that way. There's lots of criteria, criteria that depend on, that generates the decision-making of a location to start or move a business. And these things are fluid, and next quarter they will be different. There's some commonality, and if we're talking about manufacturing, not just in Maryland, but in our country, we've seen a more sophisticated approach to choosing a location for your business. And these are pure business factors. What's not included are the personal preferences, which in my experience plays a huge role. But typically, people will look at a region for a place for their business. They'll look at real estate and properties, and they will find multiple sites. It's then that those personal issues, school systems and quality of life and the safety of the community, the housing affordability, those types of things become really, really important in a locational decision. One thing that is on there is a right to work states, and we've seen some activity recently in states moving to a right to work state. Right to work means that the statute prohibits unions and companies from forcing someone to join a union or as a requirement for work. And each state is very different, so it's hard to standardize, but there's been a movement toward that, and this is what it looks like. So the ones in red are right to work states, and the ones in green are the three most recent additions to the right to work statute, and that's heavily manufacturing oriented Indiana, Michigan, and Wisconsin. So we're the kind of like the southernmost area in the northernmost eastern part of the United States that is not right to work, and that's not the end all. I don't mean to suggest that by any stretch of the imagination. It's just part of the economic climate in which we're competing these days. And then, as Gary aptly pointed out, we have something called the Great Recession we've been working through, and this is a chart of job counts. And when I say jobs, I'm talking about jobs within the jurisdictional lines of Wicomico County or the jurisdictional lines of the state of Maryland. When we talk employment, I'm talking about someone living in Wicomico County that is employed. That job may be within the jurisdictional lines of the county. It may be in other counties or other states even. So Wicomico is this line right here. And I guess she put diamonds on it. But you can see prior to the official start of the Great Recession, we're adding lots of jobs at a far greater rate than Maryland or the country as a whole. And we've indexed these to 100 so that we can get them all on the same chart and we can really compare the trends. So throughout this period, we're adding lots of jobs almost in every single sector across the board. Construction, professional business services sector really driving a very strong job growth prior to the official start of the recession. In construction, these are your pavers, your carpenters, your wall trimmers, your roofers, and professional business services. These are your engineers, your architects, your surveyors, your paralegals, mortgage brokers, real estate folks, things like that, driving the economy. And then it came to a halt. And if on the other side, if it feels like we're lagging and the recovery is a longer recovery for us on the lower shores, because it is. And the reason is we had a higher fall, number one. And two, I think we're probably more reliant in a rural area on the residential construction market. So those people that were in that market, that were out of work, had to find some other work, had to find some retraining, and they're employed somewhere else. And what we're going to see, I think, is as that market comes back, the labor force and the marketplace and the employment, it tightens up. So if you're an employer looking for employees these days, you're probably experiencing a more challenging time finding them, and I expect that trend to continue. We did start to see some improvement in 2011, 2012. We thought finally we're on the uptick, and I think a lot of that, and again, it's not an exact science, but Maryland enacted their Foreclosure Modification Act, which basically stalled some of those foreclosures, and we all hope that helped some folks stay in the homes. It also delayed that process somewhat, and they started coming, the foreclosure notices started coming back on the market right about in 2013, 2014. So today in the residential construction market, we're not seeing a whole lot of new construction. Sales are great, right? I'll yield to Mr. Martin. I know Bill's here too. Sales are terrific, and hopefully in 2016 we start to see a rise in the price points as we work that inventory level down. So that is all the negative we're going to talk about right now. The rest of it's really positive, really cool stuff, and lots going on in the Salisbury market area. 4 things we can do. First, Economic Development 101, and I know Mr. Fowler's here, and he'll likely agree with that. Retain and help the existing base grow. If you look at employer or businesses, 70–80% of revenue next year will likely be generated from customers they already have this year. As a corollary, in any community, virtually all new jobs next, or a large percentage of new jobs next year will be created from companies that are already here. So it wouldn't be smart, it wouldn't be prudent if we just focused on the new without focusing on the existing. And it has been a challenging time, especially in the manufacturing sector. And no one knows it as perhaps as well as I do, and given the manufacturing climate we've experienced in the last 5 years or so. So the more we can work with our existing base, the more we can penetrate, the more we can ask, what can we do for you? How can we help you explore new products? How can we help you explore new markets? How can we help you? And we were on a call yesterday talking about how can we help you become more efficient? The more we can do that, the better off we're all going to be. We also know nothing lasts forever. We also know attrition will occur. And we look back at the industrial base in our community, and we go back to the 70s, and we had 10, 11, 12 textile plants employing 2,000 people, right? There's nothing we did to run them out. Nothing the city did, the county or the state of Maryland. We're still all wearing shirts. It's just they're just made somewhere else in our world. In the 80s, we saw another cluster under President Reagan. You remember his mantra of peace through strength, and SDI, you know, Star Wars. They're not the current Star Wars movie coming out, the old Star Wars movie back in the 80s. But we saw a build-up in the defense industry, and we capitalized on it, perhaps on our proximity to Washington. Grumman came to town, Maytech came to town, K&L really blossomed, and all of a sudden we were able to replace those lost textile jobs with defense and electronic jobs. It was an outbreak of world peace in the early 90s, and the wall came down. The Soviets became our friends. It was great for me, you, our kids, and society. Not so hot for our defense jobs. And those same companies that added jobs in the 80s began to downsize, and yet at the same time there was another opportunity, something called digital communication or cell phones. And with the same people and the same technology and the same knowledge and the same equipment and the same facilities, we could not only sell to the Pentagon, but we could sell to Nokia and Motorola and Lucent and others. And all of a sudden we had a cluster of microwave that naturally evolved. Did we help finance some of them? Guilty. Did we help set up incubation space, Bob and Jay? Absolutely guilty. Did we help train? Absolutely. And we built that cluster. And if you look around today, look at the life science sector. Arguably, Cadista Pharmaceuticals is probably the fastest growing pharmaceutical company in the United States. Generic pharmaceutical, Liz, generic pharmaceutical company in the United States, probably in the state of Maryland. You combine that with Zoetis in the industrial park, and Trinity Sterile, which is 125 people making sterilization kits, and Tishcon with 145 people with supplements and vitamins. All of a sudden we have this cluster of life science companies. We compete with other communities that are terrific communities throughout the Mid-Atlantic region. And it used to be that we could have a nice industrial building of 100,000 square feet with 10 truck docks and 28-foot ceilings, and we were probably a lower cost operator than some of our Mid-Atlantic competitors. We're seeing lots of those buildings throughout the Mid-Atlantic today. So what else can we do to promote our community above and beyond the property, above and beyond the real estate? What makes us unique, as Gary was talking about? Danny, you've got some great port facilities down in Crisfield, and Mary, the Muriel Select is a unique facility. It's not for everybody, but there's somebody out there that can use that. It has multiple buildings. I'll yield to you, but it's 65, 70,000 square feet of space, something like that. And we have an airport here. Not every community has an airport with 6,400-foot runways and an industrial park there. So capitalizing on, like as Gary suggested, capitalizing on those assets that we do have here. And then telling our story. And it's more than just the airport. It's more than a port. It's more than the educational system. It's you can come here to grow your business. You can be successful here, and we can tell you lots of businesses that have done that over years. So let's tell our story, and let's be unique on how we tell it. The third thing we can do is fill the positions we have open. And I think Katerina and we're well-versed on the Eastern Shore or Lower Shore with this, started a welding training program at Toroyd Corporation. And I was thankful that she invited us to the ceremony honoring the 9 graduates who received their certification in welding, and they received a certificate of excellence on one hand and a job application on the other. The more we can do that, the more we can connect people that really want to work and that are looking for work with jobs that are open, the better off we're going to be. The more we can equip those people with the skill sets that's demanded by industry today, the better off we're going to be. And then the fourth thing we can do is grow our own. We can organically grow our own. We're well versed in that. The microwave sector, every single one of those sectors were startup companies. We can trace their roots right back to the founding of K&L Microwave in 1970. So what kind of assistants can we be? What kind of centers of entrepreneurship can we create? Or is it incubators, accelerators, a co-work space? Is it makerspace, James, wherever you are? This type of thing. So we can build that ecosystem where people want to start a business here, where people find it easy to start a business here, where people can be successful. Think about the area, the opportunities in agribusiness and technology. Think about the companies that stemmed from the founding of Purdue Farms in 1920. Think about all of the spin-offs from that. What if we can continue and duplicate and build that process? That's what we can do here. I remember Ignite, Salisbury, Jake, I'll yield to you. It was a couple years ago, maybe. Really exciting thing. Lots of entrepreneurs coming up. Same thing with TEDx coming to Salisbury. This is a commercial a little bit, and at the end of January 30th, something like that. So it's TEDxSBY.com, I think. Cool stuff in the entrepreneurial world. We've showed market improvement since this time last year. These are employment numbers. So if the second quarter employment jobs report came out earlier this week from Dollar, and in Wicomico, we yielded about 1,000 more jobs in the second quarter of 2015 than we did the second quarter of 2014. And very similar stats with their counterparts in other communities. So the trend has been employment growth, and this is employment. It's not jobs that we're looking at here, but pretty strong growth. And I think we'll see that, Mr. Mason, sir, when we go to New York on the income tax collection side, because more people are working, and the analysts have said as much on that. I remember going back into the city council of, I think it was a couple years ago, and it was just an update to the city council, and President Jake Day at that time of the city council said, Dave, this report came out from this U.S. Conference of Mayors, and we're not doing so hot over here. And he's looking at me, and I'm thinking, Jake, you just can't look at all these reports coming out. We don't know who these folks are. We don't know the methodologies. And he said, okay, Dave. And now it came out, and we're doing a whole lot better. So now I've changed my mind. These guys are a pretty good organization here. These guys, methodology is right on target, and we're moving forward in a very positive direction. At the end of the day, it's all about people. I remember I'm from Salisbury, and thanks, George, for the kind introduction. At the end of the day, I'm from Salisbury, and I don't remember who told the story, but I'll never forget the story itself. And I was playing football excuse me for one second. I was playing football at the Salvation Army. We used to call it Red Shield. Actually, I was watching others play. I usually was kind of like a substitute on kickoffs and stuff like that. But the other guys did a great job. But I was on the team, and we had a banquet that at the end of that year. And I can't remember who told the story, but I'll never forget the story. And it started with a father who returned home from work one day, and he was greeted at the door by his son. And his son says, Dad, can we play catch tonight? And the dad said, I've had a really long day at work, and we'll play catch. I just want to rest for a few minutes. And the son ran to his room, and 10 minutes later he comes back and says, Dad, can we play catch tonight? Dad says, sure. And he sat down, he picked up a paper and picked up a magazine and loosened his tie and said, I just had a long day. Hasn't been all that good even. I want to rest, and then we'll play catch. So the son runs back to the room, and sure enough, 10 minutes later he comes down, can we play catch? And with that, the dad tore a page out of that magazine. And the picture of the page he tore it out was of the lower shore. And it showed all of the highways and all the streets and all the streams and all of the creeks and the employment centers and the universities and the healthcare centers and every nook and cranny of the lower shore. And he tore it up into relatively small pieces. And he gave it to his son. He said, take this back to your room, put it back together, and then we'll play catch. My son runs up to the room. Sure enough, 10 minutes later, he comes back with the map all put together, just like it was. It was in the magazine. I say, how did you do it? My son, well, see, on the back was a picture of some people. So I know when the people were together, the lower shore was together. And that's the fabric. That's the story we have to tell. Thank you very much.